Hi, welcome to 111 Minna Gallery. I'm Emily Fromm, and we're here at my show, There You Go, Wherever You Are. And welcome, thanks for joining. These are some of the paintings I made of San Francisco, where we are. And over here we have the legendary Lucky 13 bar, Church and Market Street, which recently closed down during the pandemic. This one is Tony's Cable Car Restaurant on Geary, one of the last of the drive-in burger joints here in San Francisco. I'm trying to highlight places in cities around the country, around the world, where we have these important histories that we're seeing, struggle, especially in these times. So the businesses that aren't currently open, I want to memorialize them for the people who remember them and love them. Also beginning to incorporate members of the community into the artwork. So in this one in particular, we have Virginia Ramos. She was the tamale lady of San Francisco. She passed away a couple of years ago, selling tamales at the bar. Sprinkled in, that's actually me right there, little artist cameo. This one here, I actually go get a grilled cheese sandwich here about once a week, so I know Lisa and the staff, and they let me take their picture so I could paint them in. And yeah, I just had a really good time with the little details, signs, and little facets in their restaurant.
Now this is your more of your San Francisco series, right?
Yeah, this is the rest of the series here, so I tried to capture a little bit of each different neighborhood. This one is the Inner Sunset, good old donut world, and the N Judah rolling by. And this one here is Chinatown, Penang Gardens, and I think this is right off of Grant Street. And this one here is Outer Mission area, Eric's workwear. It's now closed down.
That's my neighborhood.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the sign's still up, and then the Foxy Lady Boutique, half the sign's there, so I had to paint it backwards.
Good thinking.
Well, thank you. It's just what's there,
Right?
So this one's 6th Avenue Aquarium and Flowers on Clement Street. If you've ever been in there, it's just like the wildest fish and aquatic plants you've ever seen. They have 2 stories, so you can see the little fish in the windows up there. But it's a neighborhood favorite for decades, and they're still open today, which is awesome. You can still go down there and get your flowers or your fish. And I think not far, like 2 doors down or so across the street, it's Toy Boat, the dessert shop. I want to paint that one too. They're a legacy business, I believe now. They were just purchased. Anyway.
Oh, so cool.
This one is Columbus in North Beach, Nick's Corner Store. And just a little personal backstory, but this is supposed to be a local artist, Gina Contreras, and I painted a few friends, Yaros Slaps, Reyes Magos. This is my husband, Jimmy Rogers, and this was the night we were all out for Gina's show at Mule Gallery, so a couple years back. Really nice memory of a really good art show.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll tend to hold on to those good pre-pandemic moments and treasure them.
So distant.
Yeah.
Right now.
This one is real close to my neighborhood, actually. At home, I walk by here pretty often. It's the historic Ocean Park Motel out by Ocean Beach. And this is Buffy McGuire. She owns the Lady Falcon Coffee Roastery.
Cool.
This one's the Tenderloin, Larkin Street here. We have the New Century Theater and a little bit of Sunny Rain. And another local artist, Lillian Shanahan there in her City Lights bookstore hat. And last up, this is Casanova Lounge on Valencia Street. And you might recognize that as the gallery's own David Young, working the door.
Oh, I love it.
And friends Noah and Noah.
So awesome. And thankfully, Casanova is still open.
They're open, yeah. You can still go down there and get a margarita.
Oh my God, they're so good.
Thank goodness. So this collection of ink drawings was some of the first work I was making, thinking about traveling, and we'll get into the New York and London collections in a minute, but these ones were kind of, I was sourcing reference images of places I was visiting in the past few years, mostly before the pandemic, so Seattle, Portland, Some local, this is San Francisco. These two are Colorado, and then there's Winters and Pacifica back there. So this series was just starting to kind of connect with signs in other cities and look for these striking cityscapes while I was out and about and wanting to take a piece of that home. And it was a different process for me as well, because all of my work in this show is done with acrylic paint on canvas or panels. And these were just India ink on Canson paper. And then I cut it and collaged it onto colors that reflected the signs. So, for instance, the Elephant Supercar Wash in Seattle is like this really bright, iconic pink. Twin Peaks has that great blue. And I just wanted to kind of combine simpler colors with these iconic signs on the West Coast.
Cool. Now, dude, for this series, I know typically you photograph places you've been. Like, was this more like research, or did you use old photos from travels?
I took all of the photos myself. So, like, I think this was one of the oldest ones. This is a Portland one, and I was visiting some friends up there. We were just at a pinball shop, and we saw this motel sign across the street with like a really great sunset happening, and I was just like, I gotta take a picture, everyone, like, see you later. And I went over there and shot it, and then fortunately I cataloged it through the years, so when I couldn't travel during the pandemic, I had a backlog of work I could make. A lot of my work is made locally. Like, almost everything I made before this show was places I've lived or, lived in while I was making it. So this was my first concept that involved travel, and I picked quite a time to do it. But I was able to get enough reference material ahead of time, and then I really enjoyed the process of being able to kind of travel through my art when I couldn't travel in real life. So it was a really positive experience, to be honest. All right, whoa, we're in New York. All right. So this series is all New York locations. We have some areas in Brooklyn, Coney Island, of course, Manhattan. So New York was the last place I visited before the pandemic, August 2019. And fortunately, I was there, at a busy time of year, and I got to take all these reference photos for the show. I planned to do a art fair in April 2020. So that was the original plan. I was making all these paintings, trying to capture just the absolutely mind-blowing amount of people on the streets in New York. The day I was at Coney, it was just wildly hot day, and people were absolutely everywhere lining up to go on the rides. And when I got back home, I was so inspired by these pictures that I took and just the vast, amazing, streetscapes of people and, seeing what everyone's up to there. I just had so much fun taking the reference photos. And when I got back and was working on the series, mostly before the pandemic, it's such a contrast now with the work I was able to make with photos during the pandemic, having to incorporate people I knew and people in the community into the work because they weren't actually out. It was a really different experience. So I think that's visible here. Like, this was, a lot of the reference photos I took were really, really close to what these turned out looking like composition-wise. For most of the San Francisco work, I line everything in a navy blue, and that's like a custom mix that I made. And so I've used that for many years because I just feel it speaks to the coastal nature of the city. And when I was starting New York, that didn't feel quite right. So I made a different color for the lines here. And it's just kind of this purpley gray that I felt captured the urban grit a little bit differently than I was able to do in the past. So it was my first time really making a big body of work about a different city than, California. And it called for a new palette. But of course, I used some things I always do, like the signature kind of red shade. I got pretty into yellows at this time, I think, with the New York cabs, and that sort of stayed present in most of the work. So sometimes one series will inspire the next. We actually got to go on the cyclone that day, and it was a really wild roller coaster. One of the oldest in the country, I think, all wood. Yeah, it was a good time. With this series, this is kind of my first attempt to paint an interior space. I went with places in my own home, and was sort of thinking about naturally occurring still lifes, sometimes reoccurring, I guess, depending on the space, still lifes that just kind of pop up in your everyday experience. So this one's my coffee table. This is my dresser, but I use it for painting. It's kind of more of a painting space than a living space, to be honest. And the top one is my bathroom medicine cabinet. So usually I'm out in the world taking pictures of exteriors that I'm inspired by, and here I started to kind of look inward into my own home and my own life. I was photographing things like my kitchen, my bar cart, my mail, just things that kind of drift across your plate. And though I took some of these reference photos prior to the pandemic, it seemed like during lockdown it was just what I wanted to paint. A lot of the time when I, wasn't able to travel or see people or go out, it really felt like the home was an area of study. So I wanted to do these larger than life versions of areas so I could focus on the text and the images in there. I had a great time painting these little sardines. We actually got those in New York from Russ and Daughter's Deli out there. And yeah, I think, these services are always changing in your life, but reflect what you have, what you do, what you're up to, can be really interesting. And I was inspired by some friends in the art community. One friend that I admire, Cristo Oropeza, has done a really beautiful series called Whatever the Work May Be. And he worked and still works for the MoMA as a preparator, an installer. And so he did these really great pieces highlighting his humble objects like his palette or his paints, and things that would be considered, work material, maybe lowbrow items, and he's put them in this fine art place that really, really spoke to me as a concept and made me think about, what do I use and what do I have as, part of my home. And from there, yeah, I took all these photos and started studying them and painted my favorites in this scale. And I even got to do a little cityscape on the Las Vegas Cup up there. I think with all the work, whether it's an exterior or an internal space, you're kind of capturing a snapshot in time that, the text and the people and the details will reflect, the longer we go. Probably dating myself with some of the items that I have already, in the medicine cabinet. That Betsy Johnson bag is probably 15 years old anyway. But, it's real. Like, this is a much more personal series for me. It's the first time I've painted my own home before, and I don't think it'll be the last. I really like the little things I got to include. Like, these are some art pieces in our own collection. Artists, I think this is an Emilio Villalba, and this is a Brian McDonald piece that we have. The middle, I think, is a Seattle artist we have up, a portrait of our cat, Brandon Vosica. Anyway, at the time I was painting a commission of Doc's clock in the Mission, so that's visible there in the mirror. That's actually my arm taking the picture. That's my cat walking by. So, a lot of things that might not be apparent to anyone, but it was a very personal series for me. This is the smaller work from London, all chicken shops and pubs, mostly in East London. And yeah, again, I didn't take the reference photos for these. I was sent them by the gallerist I was collaborating with. So it was really interesting to see her kind of try and guess what I would have wanted to take pictures of. She did a really great job selecting signs and fun textures. Had a great time with like the checkerboards and the illustrations of food like in the windows. Really, really fun things, yeah, and different than you see in the States for sure. Made me hungry and thirsty most of the time. All of the perspectives of these are just, like a 1 point straight on. Whereas a lot of my other pieces, I try to layer in all those signs and get as much visual information as I can in the shot. So for these, I find myself kind of adding in details differently, just in the individual storefronts and trying to, I guess, infer as much information as I could from a distance.